When I first started doing stand-up comedy about 2 years ago, I was asked why I didn't do Christian stand-up comedy, and the answer was I didn't know enough Bible jokes. There's not that many. It's a pretty serious book. I don't know if you guys know it. But I could think of a couple. The first one is, and this is my favorite story in the entire Bible, and it's, so Elisha, that's he's walking, and this group of teenagers notice that he happens to look old. And they start going like, "Hey, Baldy. Hey, old man." And then he goes, "Hey, bears." And out of nowhere, bears attack these kids. And kills like 40 of them, too. Like, all of them. And they never go back. Like, I want to know if he sat there and watched it take place. And he was like, "Who's old now?" I want to know if he, like, realized he had gone too far. Like, my bad. Sorry. But I've been working for years trying to craft my own bear power. You know, I'm going to be able to just, bears. Out of nowhere, I got bears doing my bidding. It hasn't worked yet. But then the other kind of funny story, and this is more of a warning towards pastors, try to keep it short, because people's lives depend on it. Eutychus. I don't know if you guys know him. He's in the New Testament. Paul's like, "Man, I'm going to teach these guys until about midnight because I got to leave tomorrow." And Eutychus apparently had had a pretty rough day and was tired. And so Eutychus decided he was going to sit on the third story in a windowsill and just hope for the best. Well, what he didn't know was about to happen was he was going to fall asleep and fall 3 stories to his death, right? True story. You can look it up. It's in Acts. I think it's like chapter 15 or 20 or something like that. You can look it up. But so he dies, and then Paul has to play the part of big brother. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. If you have a younger sibling, you probably do. When you hit your younger sibling a little too hard, and they start crying, and you have to get up to them and be like, "No, you're okay. Stop crying. Stop crying." Paul runs up and goes, "You're not dead." And he's like, "My bad," and stands up. Like, that's what happened. He had to play big brother. I was the second of 3 kids, so I'm the middle child. Basically what happened was my parents decided they wanted to have a kid. That's the oldest brother. And then they decided they want to have, an intelligent, attractive son. And so I came around. And then they wanted to recreate it and realized quickly thereafter they couldn't and just gave up. So that's why there's only 3 of us. I was too good for the rest of them. I was a preacher's kid. If you want to know what that is, just think back to like Pee Wee football. And you had that one kid that was the coach's kid. And he was never the best kid, right? Like, he was never the most athletic kid. He was just the coach's kid. And the coach was the hardest on this kid, right? And you'd be sitting there and you'd run a drill. And he'd look at him and be like, "You got to run at full speed." And you'd be like, "Coach, I think he did. I think he's giving you all he's got. I mean, he's doubled over, so I don't think he's got much more." Crazy. And what I realized, though, was once I had kids was, no, I was mentally breaking my mom daily. Like, that's all I was doing. And by the way, I wasn't the first, and I'm not the last, okay? People, your kids, like, you'll never understand what you did to your parents till you have kids. And they said, like, when I was growing up, "I hope you have a kid just like you." And I thought it was... So those of you who don't know, I got saved at the Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. And what happened was, a lot of my friends say I say that phrase too much. But what happened was, when I was young, like 11 or 12, I realized that I was athletically gifted. I was also physically gifted. I was a lot bigger than most of my friends. And my family, we grew up very poor. And I realized that I had the strength and the power to pull us up out of the deep end. And I remember when I was a freshman, I got knocked out unconscious. Bad. It was the worst concussion I ever had in my career. And the doctor said, maybe he shouldn't play football. And I remember having a prayer where I told God, I don't care what your will is. I'm pulling my family out of this mess. And then every year I'd have an injury. Something that would sideline me just for a little bit. And it was the same idea. The funny thing was, I led the prayers before the games in the locker room. And I'm sitting there telling God what he's going to do. I remember one time, right before the season started, I sprained my ankle. And a friend of mine was like, man, I'm glad that God healed you. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. My hard work and pain threshold is what's keeping me here. He has nothing to do with it. He's trying to hold me back. And so I get to the end of high school, and I get the opportunity to go play college football. And then my girlfriend, who's now my wife, gets pregnant. And I felt this strong need that I was not meant to go play football. But I don't care what he thinks, I'm doing it. So I go to college. Remember, I'm supposed to pull us out of this hole. How am I going to pull us out if I don't get rich? So I go to college. And I'm not kidding, 3 days in I got hit with something called rhabdo, which I still don't understand to this day. But basically your muscles just start secreting the acid off of, whenever they tear. And your kidneys, there's too much of it for your kidneys to digest it. And so I almost killed myself. Like straight up, my body tried to kill itself. But I don't care what his will is, because I got to pull us out of this hole. So I go about a week later, and I start having what's it called, your gallbladder? Started getting gallstones. And that healed. And I remember still fighting them, and I fought them, and I fought them. And also, something you got to remember is, another reason I was so vengeful, I would call it, is when I accidentally got my girlfriend, wife, now pregnant. A lot of people who I knew from, not a lot, but people from the church that I knew would say terrible things. And if that's how people of God are going to treat somebody who's in pain, I don't have anything to do with them. So anyway, we're in the middle of this. I heal from the gallstone. And then I'm doing what's called a thud-up practice. And this is all me. I haven't even actually done any practice yet. This is all me just trying to get cleared to play. And I remember we're doing a thud-up practice. I get hit in the head, and I get what was at least documented as my 4th concussion. And the doctor tells me, at the school, tells me that he doesn't recommend that I keep playing. And this time I caught it. I had a wife and a kid to look after, and I didn't want to be that guy who didn't know what he was doing. So I quit football, I quit college, and I came home. And I remember, it's funny, my way of thinking, because I come home and I'm sitting there like, God, if you are great, then why am I in this situation? When I spent the better part of 10 years telling them to, get off. And so then I started to drink. I drink a lot. I would go through 2 30-packs a week from the age of about 19 till October. And it helped me forget that I was a special one. I was the one that was going to pull my family out. By the way, I never did. I failed. But I look at it differently now than I did then. I could drink and get away from the pain. And I didn't care anymore. I would get drunk. My marriage started to fall apart. I never saw my kids because I was either drunk or at work. And then I went to Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames, and they asked me to do it, and I agreed. And then they put me as Butch. And those of you who don't know me or the play, me and Butch are pretty much the same person. And I remember I went, we get to the first night, and literally back there in the very back out next to the camera is where I got saved. Because I remember we were getting ready to walk up the aisle, and I thought to myself, man, if Butch was Nathan, he's going to hell. He's not going to heaven. And then it hit me all at one moment what I had been doing wrong. And I literally, between the back and where I was supposed to say, get off my back, you jerk, that's where I got saved. That time frame. And I realized at that moment what I'd been doing wrong. And I told my wife immediately after the show. I told her, I was like, look, I just got saved, and we're going to start going to church whenever it's open. We're going to start, I'm not going to drink anymore. And I didn't realize how much of a drinking problem I had until I quit. Because I have to wake up every day and remind myself that with the power of Christ, I can go without drinking. And so what happened was that Wednesday night, I go to bed, and out of nowhere, my testimony, everything that has happened to me in my life started running through my head. And I remember it was like the thoughts were so powerful and so good that I didn't know what I was going to use them for, but I knew that my wife needed to be quiet because I was trying to think. And so then she fell asleep and I fell asleep, and I start having dreams about how you could walk through certain jokes, how you could make this funny and that funny. And here's another thing. I don't shoot out of bed ever. You can ask my wife. Like you want to wake me up, it takes about 10 times. But this time, literally I shot out of bed, I looked at the clock, it was 2:30, and I realized it was almost like a verbal voice of like, if you do this, we can reach them. And I realized that in my life, normal preaching didn't work. I don't want to be told what I'm doing wrong. I want to have a good time. I want to laugh. So what we're going to do is we're going to laugh. And that's what I came up with, was we're going to make something where it's not a service. You can invite your friends to it, and it's funny, and they can laugh, and then at the end we'll give them something to go home and think about. Because you got to reach them, man.